Welcome to Due Process. I'm Todd Yeary. This week, the Senate failed to advance critical voting rights legislation after Republicans voted against the measure that would protect against restrictive new voting laws being passed in many Republican-led states. The Freedom to Vote Act, a compromise proposal that was intended to be more favorable to Senate holdout Joe Manchin, could not muster the necessary support to move to floor debate. This failure to move forward on critical voting rights legislation represents the third time that voting rights protections have been filibustered by Senate Republicans. With a clear lack of will to reform the arcane filibuster rules that continue to thwart critical legislative action, the focus now turns to Senator Manchin and Senator Kristen Sinema, who have opposed any action to modify or limit the filibuster. Meanwhile, President Biden indicated a commitment to filibuster reform, but only after the current stalemate over his economic agenda is resolved. Speaking to a CNN town hall audience in Baltimore, the president stated that he recognized the challenges that the current filibuster rules pose to moving much of his legislative agenda forward. However, in his calculation, pressing to revise the filibuster would cost him 3 critical votes in support for his physical infrastructure and human infrastructure, which he now calls the care economy, these measures. During the same town hall meeting, President Biden indicated that key planks of his Build Back Better plan will not likely remain in the proposal. Specifically, free community college has been stripped from the bill, as well as key energy reform measures that would phase out carbon-based energy sources, including coal. Neither of these proposals would gain the support of Joe Manchin, while the commitment to revising the tax code from the current disparate tax rate that favors corporations and the wealthy continues to be a non-starter for Senator Sinema. The president seemed reluctant to recognize that the biggest threat to his policy agenda lies within the Democratic Party. When asked about the current immigration challenges on the southern border of the United States, the president noted that some of the policy limitations have been imposed by the federal courts, while other areas, such as expedited processing of asylum claims by proposed new immigration judges, are intended to alleviate the backlog on the border. However, the president made no mention of the recent policy concerning Haitian migrants, nor the status of the several thousands of migrants who were recently removed from the border. We encourage all of you to reach out to your congressperson and senators to demand that they take decisive action in moving forward with the proposed economic agenda, and also ensure that voting rights and police reform legislation is passed, even if it means getting rid of the filibuster. A new report from the Sentencing Project this week highlights the disparities in the incarceration rates of blacks in America. The report, The Color of Justice, notes that blacks are incarcerated in state prisons at a rate 5 times higher than whites, with some states' prison population of blacks higher than 50% of the prison population. The report offered policy recommendations to address the disparities, including the elimination of mandatory minimum sentences, racial impact review of existing and proposed criminal statutes, and the decriminalization of low-level drug offenses. These recommendations seem to be in line with what we have seen from the progressive, though controversial, policies of many states' attorneys. In Baltimore, St. Louis County, and Cook County, Illinois, black women prosecutors have been leading the charge toward criminal justice reform. This week, I, along with my civil rights colleagues, including Attorney Ben Crump, stood to highlight the hypocrisy in the scrutiny applied to these reform warriors. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox, St. Louis County, Missouri Prosecutor Kim Gardner, and Baltimore City State's Attorney Marilyn Mosby have all been harassed with bar complaints and criminal investigations as an affront to their policies of prosecutorial discretion and police reform. Joining me and Ben Crump were Pastor Jamal Harrison Bryant of the New Birth Church in Atlanta, Maryland State NAACP President Willie Flowers, Baltimore City NAACP President Kobe Little, Attorney J. Wendell Gordon, and Attorney A. Scott Bolden, attorney for Marilyn Mosby. We stood to highlight the unfair treatment and scrutiny of these prosecutors and others of their peers, as well as to highlight the economic value to some interest in maintaining the status quo. We will continue the fight to ensure that these public servants and others who are serious about police and criminal justice reform are able to focus on doing what the people have elected them to do. The Education Trust released a report that underscores the inequities of student loan debt for Black borrowers. The report identified attitudes Black borrowers have about student loans and student loan debt. Specifically, the report noted that many borrowers don't believe student loans are good debt and that income-based repayment plans burden student borrowers with long-term debt. Additionally, the report emphasized that the expectation of greater career and economic mobility as a result of incurring education debt is often not the experience of students of color. Income disparities along race among college graduates are evidence of this finding. More must be done to address education equity and the cancellation of student loan debt. It will not only be a wise investment in support of a knowledge-based economy, but will also positively impact the widening wealth gap that has only worsened during the coronavirus pandemic. Rainbow Push Coalition will continue to fight for substantive policies that alleviate the student loan debt burden and expands job access and wages for students to remain competitive in a global economy. That's this week's Due Process. I'm Todd Yeary.